Hi there, and welcome to the Google Ads Fundamentals Part 1 live session. In this session, we'll be looking at everything you need to know about Google's text ads in theory. My name is Lisa Preuss, and I'm the founder and managing partner of an online marketing agency called LickClick. I'm also one of 9 Google certified trainers, and so excited to get to be your host today, in which I'll take you through the following agenda. So first off, we'll look at the fundamentals of search engine advertising, also known as SEA, followed by some important settings and key performance indicators, or KPIs. And then we'll get calculating and calculate different ad positions and what it takes to get to that top position. After that, I'll explain the structure of a Google Ads account and how to create a Google Ads campaign. We'll also look at different keyword options, how to text an ad, and what you'll need to think about from a policy perspective. After that, we'll look into 2 of my favorite tools, Google Trends and the Google Keyword Planner. And to top it off, I'll do a Q&A session. For those of you who are attending this session live, you're more than welcome to ask any questions you have in the comments section to your right. And at the end, I'll have a look at them and go through as many as I can, while those who will look at this video after the live session, you're still more than welcome to add any questions you have, and we will make sure to check that comment section in the future. One last thing before we get started. For those of you who want to read up on some more really great resources, check out the Google Ads Help Center. It's got loads of information and step-by-step guides for anything Google Ads related. So, without further ado, let's dive right in to the fundamentals of SEA. Every day, there are approximately 8 billion search queries. And I'm sure I don't need to explain what that means from a user perspective, because you all know that it's very, very likely that when you're not sure about something or you need more information, you Google. Same with me. And that's why I'd really like to look at this from an advertiser's perspective. Because at the end of the day, an advertiser wants to reach his target audience. And knowing that your target audience is also out there Googling, searching for things, this is great and an easy way to really reach them through the Google Ads search results. Now, if we look at what we see on a search results page, there are many different factors and things to keep in mind. In gray, we can see different organic search results. And let's take an example. Mr. Benelli, who owns a small Italian store in the heart of Geneva, he's just set up a new e-shop because, of course, due to Corona, he's not able to actually sell his products to his customers through his shop. He can now sell them through his e-shop. And he's built this e-shop, he's set everything up, it's live. And of course, the first thing he does is he starts Googling for some of the products that he has in his e-shop. For one, he offers pasta, he also offers prosciutto, things like pesto, and his bestsellers are vinegar and olive oil. And so, of course, the first thing that he'll want to know is, what does he see when he Googles his bestseller, olive oil? And as mentioned, we have 2 different categories here. In gray, we're seeing organic search results. So at the bottom here, we have the Wikipedia entry. And this is determined by hundreds of different algorithms that look into things like content, but also backlinks, and then determine which search result seems most relevant for a certain search query. On the right, we have the knowledge graph. And this is also a really neat gimmick, thanks to the engineers, that gives us a lot of information about a certain search query. In this case, we're seeing different nutritional facts about olive oil and information that will seem very interesting for someone searching for that. But Mr. Benelli soon notices that he's not appearing on the first search engine results page. In fact, he's on page 39. What he does see, though, on the first page are also some ads. At the tippity top, we have shopping ads. And these are easy to identify because they have a picture followed by the name Google text ads. And these seem really enticing to him because that way he can not only appear at the top of the first search engine results page, but he can start getting possible customers aware of his new online shop. And that's exactly what we'll be looking at today. How does Google Ads work? So for the text ads, we can really look into how an auction works. Now, for those of you who've never been to an auction house, there you'll see that there's typically an audience of people, all of which are very keen on getting a certain product, be it a painting or a nice sculpture. And every single person in the audience has a max bid in mind that they are willing to pay for that special product. Still, just because there's a maximum amount that they're willing to pay for the product that's being auctioned off doesn't mean that they actually have to pay that max bid. In fact, as we all know, you really only have to pay a little bit more than the next bidder. And it's the exact same for the Google text ads. In fact, instead of an audience of people, we have our different advertisers. And each of these advertisers is so keen on getting a user to click and getting into that top ad position to really gain visibility for their target audience. Each of these advertisers has a max CPC or max cost per click bid in mind that they are willing to pay for one click onto their ad. Still, just because that's the maximum amount that they're willing to pay for a click doesn't mean that it's the actual amount that they have to pay for a click. And very similar to the auction scenario, you really only have to pay 1 cent more, relatively speaking, to the next bidder. We'll look at how that calculation really works in detail in just a bit. As for Google Ads text ads, it's super important to understand that a keyword will trigger this whole auction, determine who gets to take part, and which ads will be displayed in which position, so that at the end of it, we as users can see different ads in different ad positions showing in a Google search results page. One very important distinction between Google Ads and an actual auction is that Google Ads doesn't just sell out its top position to the highest bidder. There's another very, very important factor that plays a role in the calculation. But more on that later. Important here is to keep in mind that while a keyword will trigger an ad, an advertiser doesn't have to pay for his ad being displayed, in this case, the text ad. He only has to pay the moment a user clicks. So if all goes well, and in Mr. Benelli's case, he's bidding on the keyword olive oil, his ad may appear the next time a user is searching for olive oil. And in that case, we'll speak of a so-called impression. So an impression is an ad that shows up. And still, just because the ad shows up, again, doesn't mean that the user has to click on it. There may be several ads. So that user can read through the different ads and pick the one that he or she finds most relevant for a certain search query. In our case, Mr. Benelli is lucky, and he's the one whose ad is clicked on by the user. And this gives him the opportunity to send that user to a predefined landing page. And it's so important not to just send your users directly to your homepage. Because especially in this case, when a user is searching for something very specific like olive oil, you want to send them directly to the olive oil product page where they can find a lot more information about the different olive oil products that you're selling, as well as maybe some prices. So you really need to make sure that you're sending the user to the right part of your website. Once the user has been directed to that predefined landing page, the user can read all about the product and then determine whether or not he or she wants to purchase, let's say, this olive oil. In that case, especially if the purchase goes through and the user ends up buying the olive oil that Mr. Benelli is selling in his eShop, bingo, we have our first so-called conversion. Now, a conversion can be many different things. In fact, the definition for conversion is it's a predefined goal. So essentially, a conversion doesn't always have to be a sale. It can also be someone filling out your contact form, or someone signing up for your newsletter. It can be someone reserving a table at a restaurant or writing a comment under your blog post. All these are examples of different conversions depending on whatever goal you have in mind for the users on your website. Now, Mr. Benelli's case, once someone has purchased that olive oil, they're directed to a thank you page or a confirmation page. In which case, wow, we've had a really great customer journey and seen that our user has not only clicked on the ad, but also converted in the end and purchased our product. All in all, quite a success. Still, these conversions don't just track themselves. In fact, it's very important that we set up conversion tracking to make sure that we're able to trace back important goals that are achieved on our website. In Mr. Benelli's case, what we can do is we can add a little Java code snippet, a JavaScript snippet to our confirmation page, in which case we would have the following customer journey. So once a user clicks onto our ad, Google Ads immediately drops a little cookie onto that user's device. Now this cookie can last up to 30 days. And the reason being that even if you're on the website for a little while, but then something comes up and you end up doing something else, but at a later point in time, you come back to the website, that cookie will still be there. Again, when the user is on the site and surfs through different pages before ultimately purchasing that olive oil, the moment that confirmation page pops up, the conversion tracking code immediately checks for any Google Ads cookies, and if it finds one, it can count it as a conversion, trace that conversion all the way back, and submit it to Google Ads so that the advertiser can see how many conversions there were, and also which ad texts and even which keywords these conversions can be attributed to. Moving on to some important settings and key performance indicators. Now, the one abbreviation you really need to know is CPC, which stands for cost per click. And this is the cost per click on your ad. Still, it doesn't mean it's equal to your max CPC bid. And your max CPC bid is the maximum amount that you as an advertiser are willing to pay for one click onto your ad. We also briefly discussed impressions. Again, an impression is when your ad is displayed. A click is pretty self-explanatory. And with these two metrics, we can calculate the click-through rate of an ad. And we do that by taking the clicks and dividing them by the impressions times 100. The click-through rate can also be abbreviated with CTR. And so if you have a click-through rate of, let's say, 5%, that means that out of 100 users that saw your ad, approximately 5 actually clicked on it. This number can vary, especially depending on the type of campaigns that you're currently running. For brand campaigns, the click-through rate can be much, much higher. And for other campaigns where you have lots of competitors, the click-through rate may also be lower, but 5% is a pretty good rate to have as a click-through rate. Regarding the conversion rate, this of course is only possible if you have conversion tracking in place. And for those of you that do, what you can do is calculate the conversion rate by taking your total number of conversions divided by your clicks times 100. That way you can see how many people out of those that are clicking onto your ad are actually converting. This number varies depending on your industry, depending on the type of conversion, and of course, the investment that's necessary to fulfill a certain conversion. But really, once you have a conversion rate, it makes a lot of sense to keep an eye on it and to see how different ad texts are influencing this conversion rate. We also have costs per conversion. And since CPC was already taken, this is abbreviated with CPA, also known as cost per acquisition. And your cost per acquisition is determined by your total costs divided by your total conversions, letting you know how expensive, on average, one new conversion is. We also have the return on advertising spend, abbreviated with ROAS. And this is a really key metric when looking at how much revenue is being generated per Swiss franc that you're investing into your ads, or per euro that you're investing into ads. Moving on to different bidding methods. While on the one hand, it is possible to set up manual bidding, this really means that an advertiser has to spend a whole lot of time in the Google Ads account, checking to make sure that their bids are still allowing them to appear on the first search engine results page. And at the end of the day, it's actually the main reason why a lot of people opt for the automatic bidding method. This is where you can tell Google Ads to simply bid for you based on certain goals that you may have. And those goals can be totally different. You can say that you want to maximize your clicks, or you want to maximize the number of conversions, or even you want to maximize your return on advertising spend. Which brings us to some really interesting, smart bidding options to keep in mind for those of you who have certain goals for their campaigns and can make use of the according strategy in place. So for those of you who are really interested in gaining more visibility by having a lot of ad impressions, well, the corresponding recommended strategy is the so-called target impression share. For those of you who'd prefer to have website visitors and get more traffic onto their site, it might make sense to set up maximize clicks as a bidding strategy. And for those two strategies, you really don't need to have conversion tracking in place. For those of you that do have conversion tracking in place, it's important to know that you have several different options, and you really need to make sure to match them with the goal that you have. So while I'm sure many of you may want to maximize their conversions, that is possible, but conversions don't always have to be tied to a monetary value. Some conversions, like having a user be on your website for at least 2 minutes, that may be very interesting for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this user has converted in any way that can be monetarily measured. Still, for those that want to really push their conversions that they've put in place, maximize conversions is the go-to strategy. There's also enhanced CPC, known as eCPC, or target CPA, where you can say what you'd like on average to target as a cost per acquisition. Now, for those of you who are just starting out, I highly recommend not to immediately jump into a target CPA, because what ends up happening a lot of times is that people will set this far lower than it should be. And what happens oftentimes is then that they're barely at impressions and you really don't end up reaching the goal that you actually have in mind. So what you'll want to do is first test how much you're paying on average for a conversion, and then try and set a target cost per acquisition. And for those of you who are really keen on pushing revenue, especially if you have an e-shop, well, there's just the right recommended strategy for you, and that is target ROAS, target return on advertising spend. Still, I'm sure some of you are going, okay, this sounds very promising, but how do I make sure I'm not going over budget? Well, for that, you have your daily budget. And you can set this on a campaign level. And essentially what you're saying is that Google Ads can spend up to a certain budget per day for a certain campaign. So you have total control over your budget. Now, on really good days where there's a lot of search volume for the keywords that you're bidding on in a certain campaign, Google Ads may use up double as much as the amount that you've set here as your limit. But what it also does is it'll compensate on days where the search volume is rather low to make sure that you never spend more than this daily budget that you've entered times 30.4, because 30.4 is the average number of days per month over a year. Regarding some different budget delivery methods, there's actually two that you can select here. Now, by default, your daily budget will be used up in a standard way, meaning that the ads are distributed evenly throughout your day. For Mr. Benelli, that's perfectly fine. But for those of you who are selling things like tickets for concerts next year, or something else that's being promoted and that will end let's say at midnight, well, it may make sense for you to change that delivery method to an accelerated delivery method. Because what happens here is your ads will be served more often and much, much faster until they're all used up, meaning that they could even stop being shown as early as noon. But the good part is, hopefully by then you'll have all your tickets sold and no more products that you can promote because everything's already sold out. Another very, very interesting setting is the geo-targeting. Now, for those of you that have customers on a global scale, well, that's great. You can set up a global campaign. For those of you that would like to set up a campaign on a national level, that's also possible. But for Mr. Benelli, for example, with one store in the heart of Geneva, it may make sense, especially for any wine tasting events that he may be planning for next year, to set up that whole campaign on a much more local level. So really only displaying to people who live in or are in or around Geneva. In fact, you can also exclude locations, which is extremely helpful if there are certain areas that you don't want your ads to be displayed at, like an airport, for example, or if you're right on the border to another country, you can make sure to try to exclude that country and take this whole geo-targeting to a very, very granular level. With regards to language targeting, what you can do here is you can select, based on the user's language preference, what kind of campaign should be displayed to which kind of users. In other words, and this comes in especially helpful for those of you who have a brand campaign in, let's say, English, but also in German, you can select which users will get to see which ads. Because chances are that your brand name will be exactly the same, whether someone is searching for that brand name and has an English as a preferred language, or they're searching for the brand name and have German as their preferred language. And for those of you who are wondering, how does Google know my preferred language? Well, there's several options. Either if you're logged into a Google account like Gmail, you may have selected your preferred language there. Or if not, depending on the browser that you're using, chances are you've set your preferred language settings up in your browser. And so in Mr. Benelli's case, what he could do is, seeing as the name of his store, Benelli's Specialties, will be exactly the same in English and in German, he can set up 2 different campaigns and bid on his own brand name and select the English language preference for most of the different language settings that there are, so that if someone is searching for Benelli's Specialties, they'll immediately see the English ad and be led to the English website, while people who have German as their preferred language, they would see the German ad and be directed towards the German translation of his website. So a nice little trick to keep in mind, especially for a target market like Switzerland, where you have many different languages, to keep in mind what I really like to do is, from a geographical perspective, target all of Switzerland, but then depending on the different campaigns that we're setting up and the languages of these campaigns, I'll set a language targeting option to make sure that a brand campaign with French ads is really going to be seen by people with French as their preferred language, and a brand campaign with English ads is going to be seen by people with English as their preferred language. Same with a brand campaign with German ads, that all of the German speakers would see the ad in German. Moving on to the ad position. Now, as you can see here, you have 3 ad positions, ad position 1, ad position 2, and ad position 3 that really pop out. The question is, where is ad position 4? Now, for those of you that typically scroll down to the bottom of the page, yes, you'll know that's where it is. Typically, ad position number 4 is beneath the organic search results, meaning you really have to scroll down far to see this ad position. That's also why most customers may never see ad position 4. And you'll really want to try to get into the first 3 ad positions as an advertiser. How does that work? Well, what we know is the ad position correlates with the ad rank. And we can calculate the ad rank. In fact, it's equal to the max CPC bid that an advertiser is willing to pay for 1 click on his ad, multiplied with the quality score. The quality score is a number between 1 and 10, 10 out of 10 being the highest, that Google Ads gives every single keyword that an advertiser is bidding on. We'll look into the different criteria that make up the quality score in just a second. But first, it's important to know that this is kind of the quality control of Google Ads. And that's why it's also weighed in so heavily into the calculation. Let's take a look at these examples, and you'll know what I mean. Let's say we have client A, B, C, and D. And each of them is willing to pay between 50 cents and up to 2 francs for 1 click on their ad. And for the keyword olive oil, they all have very different quality scores. Client A has a quality score of 4, giving this client an ad rank of 1 times 4, which is 4. Client B has a quality score of 6, giving him an ad rank of 0.5 times 6, so 3. Client C has a very poor quality score of only 1, giving him an ad rank of 2 times 1, so just 2. And client D has an ad rank of 0.5 times an amazing quality score of 10. And you'll see how this impacts client D's ad rank. We have an ad rank of 5. And as I said, the ad rank correlates with the ad position. The higher your ad rank, the better your ad position. In other words, ad position number 1 goes to, drumroll, client D, followed by client A, then client B, and funny enough, client C, who's willing to pay a whopping 2 Swiss francs per click, more than any of the other clients are, ends up on position number 4. This just goes to show how important that quality score is. In fact, it really gives, especially local businesses, leverage when competing against big brands, because at the end of the day, it's not just your max CPC bid that determines your ad rank and also your ad position. Regarding the quality score, now, since this is such an important metric, it's likewise important to understand the different criteria that it's made up of. First off, a very, very important criteria for the quality score is keyword performance. Now, since the quality score is given to each keyword, it's so important for that keyword to have a high click-through rate, because this plays an important role in determining its quality score. It's important for it to be relative and very relevant for the ad text. In other words, what you want to do if you're bidding on a certain keyword is have that keyword also be in your ad text. But of course, for new keywords that you've just added to a certain campaign, there is no historic click-through rate, and the relevance for the ad text is still to be determined. So that's why Google Ads will then look at your account's performance. And if that's not a motivation to make sure your account is performing well, I don't know. Another important criteria is your website quality. And what's meant by this is your landing page quality. Again, to really give a user a super user experience, make sure that that keyword that you're bidding on isn't just on your ad text, but also on the landing page you're directing the user to once that user clicks. And then there's the criteria, other factors. And this just goes to show how important ad extensions are. Ad extensions we'll look into throughout the next video, and these are really great ways to not only make your ad more relevant for users, but it gives Google Ads the possibility to make an ad extra relevant depending on different user signals. Plus, it really gives you more visibility with your ad, because what happens if your ad extensions have been set up and they show is that you can have several links underneath your ads, you can add call outs, and even an address if someone is very close to your actual location. And this just makes that ad so much more relevant to the user. Plus, again, it plays an important role to determine your quality score, and you really want to look into pushing that quality score up. In fact, what we see here will hopefully highlight that for you. Even if your max CPC bid stays the same and you work really hard on optimizing that quality score, what will happen is your ad rank will also go up, and you should see an improvement in your ad position. Still, just because you're willing to pay a max bid for a click on your ad doesn't mean that that's the actual cost per click that you end up paying. In fact, that's why I want to look at this calculation for the effective cost per click, because this will really show how to calculate that click price that each of these clients would have to pay should a user click onto their ads. Now, we've sorted this according to the ad position. Client D was on position 1, client A on position 2, client B on position 3, and client C on position D. Now, to calculate the effective CPC, what we do is we take the rank to beat of that advertiser one beneath ourselves and divide it by our own quality score. In this case, if we were to try and calculate the effective CPC for client D, we would take the rank to beat of client A, which is 4, divided by our own quality score, which is 10, giving us 4 over 10. And then, going back to that auction I mentioned earlier, relatively speaking, we still need to pay a little bit more than the next bidder. So what happens is we add 1 cent. That's right, only 1 cent more, relatively speaking, than the next bidder. In other words, client D's effective CPC would be 4 divided by 10 plus 0.01, which gives us 41 cents. And we can see the different CPCs that these clients would be paying for clicks on their ads. And again, it's so interesting to see that client C, who is willing to pay most, would actually have the highest effective CPC because this client has the lowest quality score. And when your denominator is low, the price goes up. Moving on to the structure of a Google Ads account. Now, as you can imagine, within one Google Ads account, you can have several different campaigns. And within one campaign, you can have several ad groups. Now, on the Google Ads account level, you can set up logins, your time zones, your currency, and even your invoice details to get everything all set up. While on the account level, you can set up the start and end date of your campaign. On the campaign level, you can set start and end date of that campaign, as well as your daily budget, the daily budget option we spoke about, whether it should be standard or accelerated, and your location and language targeting options. Plus, you can even select which option that you'd like it to rotate your ads with. We'll get to that in a bit. And whether you want it to show your ads in the search network or the display network. On an ad group level, you can then match different keywords that you want to bid on with different ad texts, and even select additional targeting options. So if we look at Mr. Benelli's account, what he's set up for now are 2 different campaigns, one for his bestseller product, oil, with an ad group for olive oil and another ad group for linseed oil. And then he has a campaign dedicated towards his vinegar products, including an ad group of apple vinegar and another ad group of just the plain regular vinegar. And what you'll want to do here is, first and foremost, you want to set a long list of different keywords that you think your users will be searching for your products with. And then go ahead and ask that target group. Speak to people from your target group and try to add to that list. Brainstorm with other stakeholders, and hopefully you'll soon have a very long list of keywords. Once you have that keyword list, you can then create little groups of keywords that fit together based on different topics. So in this case, after Mr. Benelli has created that big long keyword list, he groups his keywords by different topics, and only then does he start texting his ads. That way, we make sure to keep the quality score high and keep that keyword that we're bidding on in our ad text. So what do we need to keep in mind when creating a Google Ads campaign? For those that don't yet have an account, you can easily set one up by visiting google.ch or google.at or google.com/ads. And there, the first thing you need to think about when setting up a campaign, as mentioned earlier, is, do you want it to show in the Google Search Network or on the Google Display Network? As the name search may lead you to believe, the Google Search Network is on the Google search where users are searching for different terms. The Google Display Network, that's made up of millions of websites and blogs where users are not necessarily searching so much, but they're surfing. They're reading about the news. They're checking out the weather. And you can, through banners or videos, make them aware of your service or your product. Now, for those who opt for the search network, you should know that there are also search partner websites that will allow users to also search for things and on their results page display different ads that you can set up on Google Ads. Moving on to some keyword options. So let's say Mr. Benelli has decided that he wants to bid on the keyword olive oil. When a user searches for buy olive oil, chances are his ad will be triggered. Now, next up, we can see that a user has searched for olive oil for free. Even though this doesn't seem like a very relevant search query, because Mr. Benelli is bidding on olive oil, his ad is also triggered. Now, unfortunately for him, the daily budget has been used up with this last click. And now someone is searching for high quality olive oil, which would be a great match to a potential customer. But of course, because his daily budget is used up, his ad is not triggered. Now, to make sure that doesn't happen to you, I really wanted to go through the following keyword matching options. Broad match is the one I'm sure most of you are acquainted with. This is just typing in the keyword as it is. And what happens though is that it will trigger the ad that you have set up very, very often, possibly even for irrelevant search queries. That's why you can opt for the so-called broad match modifier matching option. And this is where you add a little plus before each word. That way, this word or a very similar word will have to be searched for to have your ad be triggered. If you want to take it another step up, what you can do is opt for phrase match. And here, you put your keyword into quotation marks, and what happens is your ad will be triggered if this phrase is searched for, even if there's a word behind that phrase or in front of that phrase. But the moment there is another word in between the words that you've put it as your phrase, your ad will not be triggered. Last but not least, we have the exact match keyword option, and this is when you put your keyword into square brackets, meaning that when a user searches for that exact keyword or a very, very similar form of that word, your ad will be triggered, but more often than not, your ad won't be triggered. And for those of you who are considering to use broad match, keep in mind that there is such a thing as negative keywords. And this is when you put a little minus in front of a keyword, meaning that you don't want your ad to be triggered if someone searches for this specific term. In other words, for Mr. Benelli, having production as a negative keyword could save him a lot of irrelevant clicks, because chances are someone is just trying to research how olive oil production works or wants more information about that, but doesn't want any olive oil per se. And so if Mr. Benelli were to add production as a negative keyword, he wouldn't have to worry about his ad being triggered if someone looks for olive oil in combination with the word production. So many options, what to do? Well, for those of you who are considering to use the broad match option, again, this will have your ad be triggered for many relevant search queries, and it'll for sure give you a lot of impressions and clicks. But keep in mind that your ad may also be triggered with irrelevant search queries and lead to clicks through these irrelevant search queries. Plus, you'll really need to make sure to manage and continuously update your negative keywords. On the other hand, for those who are considering to use exact match, while it definitely gives you more control over when your ad is being triggered, and therefore there's no need for any negative keywords, but still your ad may likely not be displayed even for very relevant search queries. And in general, you'll see that you have far less impressions and clicks. So how to go about texting an ad? Well, one thing's for sure, you need to make sure to have at least 2 different ad texts, if not 3 to 5. But at least make it 2, because what happens is you can then use very interesting ad rotation options. Either you can opt for the even ad rotation, in which case both of these ads would be shown alternating regardless of their click-through rate or even conversion rate. But you can then opt for an ad rotation based on performance. And this is really great. So what you can do is you can actually have your ad with a higher click-through rate or even conversion rate be favored over the other ad, meaning that this better performing ad will actually participate in more auctions. This has brought Mr. Bonelli to the following conclusion. He could, of course, try and push his own return on investment through a better click-through rate by making the ad a little more catchy, by adding more capital letters, more symbols, which he does, and soon learns that the ad is disapproved. That's why I want to quickly touch up on some editorial policy matters to make sure that your ads won't get disapproved, and if they do, that you know what you need to fix about them. So, what is a text ad made up of? Well, for one thing, there are headlines, and you can add up to 3 headlines with 30 characters each, including spaces. Now, as you can see in this example, mostly 2 are shown at a time, but again, you are able to add up to 3. Then there's the display URL, which lets you customize what the user will see. It's not your final URL or the landing page that you'd like them to be, a user to be sent to if there's a click, but this is what you'd like the user to see. This is what you'd like to be displayed. And here you can have up to 2 times 15 characters after your website's URL. Then we also have the description, and in the description you can add up to 2 descriptions, each with 90 characters, and one will be shown at a time. And for those who are ready to get started, just keep in mind the following 2 aspects. To have a really positive user experience, make sure that your ads are relevant. It's so important to make sure that they're relevant to your target audience. And then also make sure that they're honest and informative. And if you keep those things in mind, you should be fine with regards to the editorial policy. A couple more things that are good to know are the following criteria for your landing pages. Now, obviously, your website can't be under construction, and loading that page should not require any additional software like Adobe Acrobat, meaning you can't link an ad to a PDF. Also, there shouldn't be any pop-ups or pop-unders, and the original function of the browser's back button should always be intact. Assuming you have a great website which is up and running and keep the criteria in mind, here are a couple other things that you should regard while you're texting. Of course, there shouldn't be any unnecessary use of punctuation. You should use spaces correctly. There shouldn't be exclamation marks in the headline. And watch out with that one because you can only have one in the description. The last line shouldn't lead over, so you have to refrain from using a colon at the end of a sentence. No unnecessary capitalization can be used, and symbols, numbers, characters, and so on need to be used properly. Now, the next few points may seem quite obvious, but for those of you whose mother tongue isn't English, this may become an issue, and therefore it makes sense to reach out to someone who is a native speaker and have that person check your spelling or grammar, because that could be an issue with regards to the editorial policy. Furthermore, the prices and the free offers and so on, they need to be verified within 1 to 2 clicks of the landing page. You're not allowed to use superlatives like best or number 1 unless they are verified by third parties, and phrasings with click are not allowed. Also, if you do have comparative statements in your text ads, then make sure that they're being verified on your landing page. Now, quick quiz. How many policy violations can you spot in this text ad? And I'll give you a hint, the price is incorrect. $11. There are many, many different policy violations here. Feel free to check this out later. I will move right on to trademarks. Now, you need to keep in mind that the regular trademark law applies to Google Ads, and therefore you may not use other trademarks unless you have their authorization in your text ads. You can, though, bid on these trademarks as keywords. Just don't get upset if other brands see what's going on and decide that they also want to bid on your brand name as a keyword, in which case I highly recommend a so-called gentleman's agreement where the two of you will make sure not to bid on each other's keyword as a brand name as a keyword, unless of course the price wars are on. Lastly, I do want to point out one more thing. Machine learning has actually been a real push, a real driver to Google Ads. And with regards to our text ads, it's becoming more and more clear how these ads will be automatically adjusted for different user signals. So things like when someone is searching, on what operating system, what browser, which device, which language, and from where, they play an important role in determining which ad is displayed for which user. On the other hand, it gives you so many possibilities to reach out to your target audience in the right time, at the right place, with the right messaging. As promised, I do want to touch up on 2 tools that are super helpful to really get those creative juices flowing. One being Google Trends, and you can visit it under google.ch or google.at/trends. And it'll help you see things that are being searched for, buzzwords. You can also check out how one keyword is being searched for in comparison to another keyword to really see what makes most sense for you to bid on, and hopefully also inspires you to go above and beyond and try to integrate some keywords with high search volume. The keyword planner is also a great tip when you're writing that keyword list because what you can do here is you can find additional keywords based on, let's say, your website's URL, and get search volume and forecasts for different keywords you're thinking of bidding on. With that said, I am going to peek over into the comment section and see if there are any questions. And if you have saved up your question, now's the time to ask in the comment section. So with regards to the live account demo, this will be covered in the next video. So I look forward to that too. And otherwise, you are very welcome to continue asking questions in the comment section, and we'll make sure to answer them as soon as possible. Here's some more online resources for you to check out. And I would love to hear what you thought, and if there's anything else you'd like me to cover in the next video. Thank you so much for your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and thanks so much for watching.